Thank you so very much. Can you all hear me right now?
Yes.
It's a big microphone. Actually, it's not all that big. I have new glasses. This is the second day of these new glasses. You're all really close to me. It's a little uncomfortable. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It is always good to be in the house of the Lord. I come to you as what I like to call a recovering evangelical, born and raised in the Assemblies of God, families descended from the Church of God in Christ. My Uncle George McKinney is one of the elected bishops of the Church of God in Christ. And we have a long lineage, an intimate relationship with that church that on many days I love dearly, many days not so much. But we're here, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today. So the cost of change, and so I've been thinking a lot about, I tend to think a lot about change because that's kind of what I study. I'm a historian, so I study change over time, right? What did that thing look like here, and how did it change once we get over here, right? What does freedom look like? 1776, 1876, 1976, 2019. Who has it, who doesn't have it? Who defends it, who doesn't, right? Who's in, who's out, and why? That's what I do. And that's what I try to convey to my students. Hopefully I'm somewhat successful. You never know with the 18 to 21 group, right? Sometimes I was like, I should be with the 4-year-olds. You get clear feedback when you're with the 4-year-olds. This is boring. Stop it. So I thank you for that assessment. Right? So I think a lot about change. I think a lot about what it looks like, how we do it, how we think about it, and our relationship to it. And so, just a couple of things, and then I'm gonna sit down. So I'm thinking about the two ways we can think about change, right? Two broad categories, because I only have a few minutes. Right? In the first category, and this is the category that we are all really familiar with, right? Is this category that I call sort of cheap change or cosmetic change. And I wrestled with that characterization because it's not. Is it really cheap? Is it really cosmetic? It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. So let me just talk a little bit more so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. We really love the type of change that requires nothing from us, that doesn't ask anything of us, or anything at all, for that matter. This type of change is a little bit like cotton candy. You're actually eating something. You're engaged in the ritual of eating, right? But it doesn't really count for much. All you've done is you've gone through the motions. You've performed the ritual. You've paid for something. You're like, ooh, this will be good. And then you've devoured it, and it was yummy, right? This was great. Again, you performed the ritual of eating, but you are not nourished. You're not satisfied. We are not satisfied. Well, except for the sugar high, right? And that's the thing about so much cheap change that we encounter. We feel like we're putting in some great, good amount of work. We've been affirmed in this ritual, these rituals that we've engaged in. We've been told that this is good and great work. We've been told that, yes, keep doing that thing right there. Yes, keep doing that. That's good work. You should feel good about this. But the ritual, and the accomplishments, right? What are we doing? And what are we getting done when we've performed cheap change, right? So what am I talking about? And again, you'll see, right? This gets complicated. thinking about Memphis, thinking about our relationship to larger societal problems, larger societal challenges. We are invested in cheap change because that change is often built on a dedicated foundation of active and willful ignorance or innocence. Ignorance or innocence. It's built on this foundation, and sometimes it gets a little scary when we confront that foundation. What do I mean? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. King Memorial, the King Monument in Washington, D.C. He's standing there, looking very kingly, right? There's 14 quotes on the bottom, the base of that statue. 14 very eloquent and powerful quotes from Martin Luther King Jr., right? One of the titans of all of American history, not just the 20th century, but all of American history. We all know this, right? We can mention King in the same breath as Lincoln, Jefferson, right? Washington. We can do that. But when you go and look and read each and every one of those 14 quotes, you will discover that none of those quotes contain the word racism. None of those quotes contain the word segregation. None of those quotes contain the words racial inequality. How does that happen? What are the implications of that? That you can go and muse by the monument of this titan of American history, this individual who fought for justice, and not have a clear idea of what he explicitly was fighting for or fighting against. How do we understand Martin King's struggles if we don't understand that he was struggling against racial inequality? Why were we so afraid to name that in this monument? Why were we so afraid to name white supremacy in this monument? Why are we so afraid to name segregation in this monument? So I think this monument is a powerful testimony to the ways in which ignorance, right, a willful ignorance, play out when we think about social change, when we think about the cost of change, when we think about what actually has to happen, right, and what we actually have to confront. So what am I talking about here? What does that mean for us here in Memphis? It means I'm deeply committed to giving out backpacks and sneakers every fall for kids in Memphis. But I can't quite figure out what the path to true educational equality might actually look like. As if the dissemination of sneakers and backpacks was going to fix educational inequality in Memphis. And again, like I said, this is complicated, right? Am I saying that we should not give out sneakers and backpacks every fall? No. By no means am I suggesting that that work should stop. What I'm suggesting is that if our goals are educational equality for all of the children of Memphis, giving out backpacks and sneakers is not going to get us toward that goal. And that makes us uncomfortable. Right? That makes us uncomfortable. This idea that we have to name the thing that we say we seek to oppose. It makes us uncomfortable. Another example, I throw my hands up in the air when presented with the quandary of optional schools in the Shelby County school system. The optional program for the honor students who are taking these classes and have access to these resources, and the traditional kids who are in these classes and have fewer resources. Right? And how this facilitates an unequal education. And I say this as a parent of 2 kids in the optional program. I am fully implicated in this conundrum. Fully. Completely. So how does that line up, right? How does my investment in this program line up with my emerging politics around educational inequality? Right? What does it mean? What should I have done? What should we, my wife and I, have done? What should we do moving forward? Right? So I'm not here simply preaching to you all. This is for todo el mundo. Right? My clothes drive speaks to the systemic poverty that a critical mass of our residents face in Memphis and Shelby County, but when the conversation shifts from alms to the poor to engaging deeper and broader structural challenges, I am suddenly struck mute with confusion and or fiscal hand-wringing. You want to do what? Oh, how will we pay for that? But we didn't ask that question when it came time to build the multi-million-dollar new juvenile detention facility. We didn't ask that question when the legislation and the money sailed through to lock up more black children, all in the name of public safety. We didn't ask any questions about cost. Cheap change, cosmetic change. Another example, hosting the 135th annual conversation on race and inequality. A well-meaning effort that for the past 134 attempts has dissolved after the initial conversation has dissolved into, well, cotton candy after the conversations are over. Right? We run victory laps because we had these really hard conversations. And they are hard conversations. And we suffer through 56, 57, maybe even 60 minutes of discomfort with our non-white friends, talking about racial inequality, and white supremacy. And then what? And then what did we do with this newfound information? What changed in our households? What changed in our hearts? What changed in our institutions? What changed in our systems and structures? What did we do with this newfound information that made us profoundly uncomfortable, that implicated us in all manner of ways? And then what? And then what? What happens when we actually grapple with the systems and structures that are actively and explicitly working to subordinate and marginalize people of color? What happens when we actually name the thing? Back to that King monument. Lots of quotes about confronting hatred, confronting oppression, beloved community, wonderfully passive language. There were some problems somewhere that needed to be solved by someone. And strangely enough, it happened. We got some legislation. We got some black kids in some white schools, and we got some black families in some white neighborhoods, and we got, Beyonce and Barack Obama. Yay, we're winning. What exactly were we fighting? What exactly were we fighting? And if we won, why does Memphis look the way Memphis looks now? If we won, why are 50% of black kids living in poverty now? Not 1819, not 1919, now. Why are only 30% of our graduates actually college ready when they go off to college? I think it's less than that. Like the higher number is the number of high school graduates who need remedial courses once they get to college, once they get into college. That number is higher. Like, why is life just better off for people in particular zip codes? Access to health care, access to employment, less of a confrontational relationship with the cops. You live in 38112, you're going to live happily ever after. You live in 38126, may God be with you. That's not then, that's now. What's our relationship to this reality? Right? So, the other thing that cosmetic or cheap change, right, does to us, right, is it masks our genuine commitments to not actually wanting to change anything. It masks, I'm going to say that again, right, our commitments to not wanting to change anything. What do you mean? Increase my taxes. For what? For who? Oh, no. No, I don't want to commit any more of my resources to fighting for the things that I say I want on Sunday mornings in my places of worship. I don't want to center my community in the work of social change and justice. Right? Social change and justice, that's what happens when I go out to these poor people's communities and hand out those backpacks and those sneakers. That's the work of social change. That's God's work. So all of this stuff about the institutional changes that need to happen in order to bring us closer to what we say we want to move towards. No. Don't burden me with that. I'm over here doing the work. These backpacks and these sneakers. So when you find yourself on the other side of the ignorance-innocence divide, when you find yourself increasingly dedicated to something other than cotton candy, it's a daunting thing. Right? When we move beyond the cotton candy version of change, when we move beyond the change that's easy, the low-hanging fruit, when we move beyond that, when we start to actually name the thing, and when we start to be bold and brave in our assessments and our analyses, that could be truly, truly terrifying. And more than a little bit scary. But the facts are hard to avoid. True change is unavoidably difficult. True change is unavoidably terrifying. True change is drudgery. It is not. There's not a whole lot of high fives associated with the work of true change. You're not going to be on the nightly news for the work of true change. Right? Mid-South Peace and Justice here in town is undergoing a really severe financial crisis. Right? Mid-South Peace and Justice is engaged in the work of true change. And because they are engaged in the work of true change, they don't get a whole lot of local funding. Local foundations don't have a whole lot of interest, quite frankly, in funding Mid-South Peace and Justice. The folks that bring you the Memphis Bus Riders Union that says, hey, you know what? Our transportation system is terrible and we need to fix it. And also say the reason we don't fix it is because we're not all that interested or invested in the lives of the people who need public transportation. We want more jobs here. We want the city to be better. We want the city to improve and to grow. But we're not interested in investing in one of the central needs of poor and working class people, which is basic transportation. How do we work that out? How does that play out for us as a city? I live in Midtown, and my son just graduated from White Station. So getting on the bus and going from one end of Poplar to another, it's a 20-minute ride. So we do east-west really well. We don't do north and south really well. And north and south is where the black people live. That's not accidental. So coming down Poplar is 20 minutes, but if my son wanted to get a bus that drops him off on Valentine, which is a stop that's right across the street from our house, that's another 90 minutes on the bus. Because that bus has got to go downtown, and then he's got to transfer to 2 other buses to literally go 5 blocks north off of Poplar. Crosstown is opened up, and mysteriously, one of the crosstown lines, one of the lines responsible for bringing a whole lot of folks from South Memphis down to the crosstown area, that line got discontinued. That's not an accident. East-west travel down Poplar, vigorous and vibrant. North-south travel in Memphis, sporadic, inconsistent, underfunded. That's not an accident. So what are we going to do about that? We've named the issue. So what are we going to do about it? Again, this is profoundly troubling because that implicates us in this work of true change. So true change. Frederick Douglass kind of nailed this down back in the 19th century. And many of you are familiar with this quote. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom, yet deprecate agitation, are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. What does that mean? It means the city of Memphis will love you as long as you continue supplying backpacks and sneakers. The city of Memphis will fall out of love with you when you ask the question, why do students still need backpacks and sneakers? What's the quote? When I fed the poor, they called me a saint. When I asked why they were poor, they called me a communist. So this is hard. This is hard work. True change always contains within it an element of struggle, an element of sacrifice, an element of uncertainty. Cost. That's the cost of the change. So what are we to do? If only there were a set of examples, say maybe in a book. A set of guiding principles laid out by some men and women who sought to bring about a revolution of values, say roughly 2,000 years ago, who sought to shift the fabric of their societies in which they lived. If only we had a blueprint for changing the world. If only there were such a book. If only there were such a philosophy. If only there were such a worldview. Golly, where could we find that? This is what makes so many Christians so uncomfortable. The revolutionary implications of the Gospels. The revolutionary implications of the book that we Christians say we hold most dear. The revolutionary implications of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, Corinthians, Thessalonians. On down the line, that's all I know. If only we had a blueprint. This blueprint for deep, meaningful engagement. You want to see what meaningful engagement across lines looks like? Go read the work Paul's putting in the New Testament. There you have it. Read his letters and see what he's doing in terms of grappling with these ancient traditions in the context of trying to make a new tradition. Standing up to thousands of years of tradition and saying, hey, you know what? Love you, but that's not enough. We got to do something new. And then seeing how Christians replicate that recipe down through the ages. Somebody's a slave owner and somebody's a slave. Somebody, both of them professing Christianity, somebody's wrong. Somebody's incorrect. We've got a gospel that tells us which one it is. This is not a mystery. But the church, so conflicted, simultaneously revolutionary and reactionary, simultaneously willing to create a new world and more invested than almost any other institution in our society in maintaining a status quo, designed to subordinate, designed to marginalize, also designed to lift up very particular groups of people. That's our church. That's our tradition. That's our heritage. That is both our peril and our prospect. That is both our challenge and our opportunity. I'm an adherent to a faith that was dead set on the enslavement of my ancestors. That said, this is the will of God. I am also an adherent to a faith that heard me pray out in the slave fields and broke up the conspiracy to destroy me. I am an adherent to that legacy, that titanic conflict between keep this and change this. And so when we arrive at our conclusions about what needs to get fixed, what needs to get changed, when we arrive at what true change looks like, that's when the music stops playing. That's when you stop getting the press releases coming your way. That's when you fall out of favor in your society. Ask the 12 disciples how it wound up for them. Right? Reverend, you can fix my theology on this, but I don't think any of them lived to old age. I don't think any of them lived to retirement. So, my last few minutes. We've got an example. We have a faith that exposes us to what I like to call revolutionary possibility. And that's one of the first things that we have to understand, is that a new world is possible. It's possible. We've seen it done before. Thinking about the African American experience, my parents were born in Arkansas in the 1930s. My parents were born into a segregated society. My parents were born into a society that legislated subordination. We don't live in that exact society anymore. Are there still challenges? Are there still burdens? Are there still barriers? Of course, obviously. You live in Memphis. You know this. And if you don't, you're being willfully ignorant. Or you're just really, really invested. But we can see the change. We can see the change. And so we've got a blueprint for meaningful engagement. We have, we see that we need to have a willingness and an ability to name the things that must be named in order to face and change them. We have access to a set of stories where people of different religions and ethnic backgrounds sought to create a common path, sought to create a new community. We have an understanding also of the concept of what a friend of mine calls revolutionary patience in the midst of deliberate and intentional action. This change that we seek is going to take a while. We're not going to knock it out on some sort of quarterly basis. Right? Back to that ignorance, back to that idea that we can just sort of, if we give out enough sneakers, we can move the needle on some of these major issues. Look at the Look at the nonprofit society. Look at the nonprofit world here in Memphis, right? There's a whole lot of sneaker giving, a whole lot of backpack giving. And then at the end of the fiscal year, they get together a lot of local nonprofits and say, well, we haven't moved the needle on poverty. Well, we haven't moved the needle at all on educational access. Well, our kids aren't doing better in schools. Well, but we gave them all sneakers and backpacks. Well, maybe we need a new brand of sneakers. Maybe we need bigger and better backpacks. You know what you need. You know what needs to happen. Local foundation. You're just simply not invested in doing the work to get us where we need to go. It's really that simple. This isn't a mystery anymore. Paying people a wage so that they can feed themselves and their families, this isn't a mystery anymore. How can we help poor people? Give them more money for work they do. How about that? But we live in a city, right, where that formulation is literally off the table. Let's be clear about that. There's certain places and spaces in our town, when we talk about how to help the poor, you simply cannot mention a living wage. Because the local businesses and foundations that are hosting your event are like, hey, that's off the table. Talk about something else. What do we do when we are confronted with that reality? What do we do about that? How do we work that out? So true change, an understanding of a need for this revolutionary patience. So Martin King, the last sermon before he dies, is a sermon called Unfulfilled Dreams. And I love teaching this sermon because it's a great bookend to I Have a Dream in 1963. We tend to encase Martin King in 1963 as if he walked off the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and died. He didn't. He lived another 5 years. And in those 5 years, he started to come to an understanding of the need to alter, to fix, to revise systems and structures in American society. It wasn't enough. And he always knew this. It was never enough to simply get black folk and white folk in the same room together. That wasn't the object of the game. The object of the game was access to resources. The object of the game was to confront legal segregation. The object of the game was to confront white supremacy and all of the structures that supported white supremacy. That was the object of the game. Always was, despite what that monument might tell you. So in 1963, I have a dream, right? Content, not by the color of the skin, content of the character. In 1968, he gives a sermon called Unfulfilled Dreams. And the text from that is Kings 8:17 and 18, where Solomon is talking about wanting to build a temple to his father David. And he wants to build this temple, but he doesn't do it. He fails. So King is ruminating on what it looks like to work hard, to work for something, and work and work and work and work and work. Plot and scheme and strategize and organize and push and yell and shout and pray and not get what you want and not see it through. I think about the folks who prayed for freedom in the 1600s, who didn't see it. Their children didn't see it. Their grandchildren didn't see it. Their great-great-grandchildren didn't see it. Their great-great-great-grandchildren didn't see it. Their great-great-great-great-grandchildren didn't see it. And yet still they prayed for it. And so King says, each of you this morning is in some way building some kind of temple. The struggle is always there. It gets discouraging sometimes. It gets very disenchanting sometimes. Some of us are trying to build a temple of peace. We speak out against war, we protest, but it seems that your head is going against a concrete wall. It seems to mean nothing. And so often you set out to build a temple of peace, you are left lonesome, you are left discouraged, you are left bewildered. Well, that is the story of life. And the thing that makes me happy is that I can hear a voice crying through the vista of time saying, it might not come today or it might not come tomorrow, but it is well that it is within thine heart. It is well that you are trying. You may not see it. The dream may not be fulfilled, but it's just good that you have a desire to bring it into reality. Yes, it is well that it's in thine heart. Martin King is struggling against the systems and structures, against the words that literally do not appear on his monument. But he names the thing, and he understands that this is going to take a minute. Yet and still, he persists. Yet and still, he persists. So what are we going to do? How are we going to confront these challenges, right? As a civil rights scholar, and I'll leave you with this, right? As a civil rights scholar, I'm in my 25th year of talking to people about the ravages of racial inequality. And it feels a little bit like this, banging a head up against the wall. And how many times do we have to tell folks that white supremacy is killing all of us? How many times do we have to tell folks that white supremacy has brothers and sisters? White supremacy's fraternal brother is patriarchy. White supremacy's other fraternal twin is homophobia. That this is a package deal. How many times do we have to tell folks this? I hate Obamacare. Obamacare is literally giving you the provisions, white folks in West Virginia, that if you die of black lung, your benefits go to your wife. That's Obamacare. And you hate Obamacare. Your hatred is literally killing you. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You can look to the Gospels. Look to our faith. Take our faith seriously. And take this work seriously. And know and understand that a new world is possible if we're willing to confront the realities of true change.